Good evening, everyone. Welcome along to another edition of the VCO Esports studio. I'm back after a week off. Thank you very much to the boss man, Florian Hasper, for holding the fort whilst I got my times wrong. I'm grateful to be back with you guys. And as you may have seen following our VCO YouTube channel over the weekend, it's been a very big weekend for the races on ACC and more specifically, the SimGrid VCO World Cup, which held its second round with a 24-hour race at Spa-Francorchamps. Now, we've seen 24-hour races in lots of different platforms, but this high profile on ACC, probably a brave new world. And the man kind of behind it is the founder of SimGrid and the founder of Coach Dave and professional racing driver, David Perel, who joins us now. And it's great to have David with us because we're going to talk a little bit about your history, David, but also about obviously SimGrid and all of the things that you are doing with ACC. It's great to have you along. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Ben. Nice to officially meet you, I suppose. And yeah, we had a really awesome race this weekend. I was having to do sort of two things at once. I was doing real racing at the same time as the World Cup was going on, so it was a pretty busy time for me this last weekend.
Let's just put you into context for those people who perhaps don't necessarily know of who you are and your history in motorsport. I know you as a professional racing driver through and through, basically.
Yeah, so I have a sort of mixed career. When I was younger and I was trying to get into karting, I lived really far from the racetrack and didn't really get to do much practice in a real life kart. So I figured out already when I was in my very early teens that I could use a racing game to learn how to become a better real racing driver. And already since then, early 2000s, I've been really passionate about sort of the crossover between sim racing and real racing. I had a 7-year gap between my karting and GT career where I didn't do any real life racing and used a simulator basically to keep myself sort of sharp. And when I came into GT racing, it sort of clicked, not almost instantly, but very quickly. And I attribute that just to the amount of time I spent in the virtual world. So I've always had this really strong connection. Sorry, go for it.
Back in those days, what were the platforms and games that you were using to keep yourself sharp?
Oh yeah, so it started first with the early F1 games on PlayStation, and then Gran Turismo was had a massive effect on my life, a massive influence, if you will. The first sort of racing platform that I built was focused on Gran Turismo. It was called GT Playground, where people could compare lap times and you'd upload your replays to my website and so on. And that was selfishly built so that I could see if I was the best in the world. But then on the PC side, R Factor, GTR2, Netcar Pro, those to me were just incredible games, or sims, if you will.
So from very early days then, you've also had an involvement in kind of building websites, coding, and the kind of the back end of creating these platforms.
Yeah, because my brother and I, when we were karting, we had to pay for it ourselves. So we started a business when we left school in an effort to pay for our racing, and that was on the tech side. So it started with building the mom and pop stores. And I learned design by designing my race helmet in paint and then moving it to a design software called Fireworks, which then led me to website design. And as a result of that, learned how to develop websites. And the first website that I developed myself entirely, design and development, was this GT Playground website. And was before there was such a thing as social media. So it didn't get as much traction as I would have liked. But I always had this idea in my mind that if I finished my racing career, I would go back to tech, but it came much quicker because of COVID. And that tech that I wanted to build was something in sim racing.
Yeah, because really, as a player in this kind of world of organization, it's only since COVID where Coach Dave has appeared and then SimGrid. Why not before that point? Or has it just been this catalyst of different things that have all come together?
The reason why I didn't do it before was simply because I wanted to focus on my racing career. I'd sort of just become a professional. I was in my second or third year into being paid as a racing driver. And that's sort of been my dream my whole life, to 1, be paid as a racing driver, 2, race for Ferrari, and 3, get to Le Mans. And that was my focus. But when COVID hit, I realized that in terms of a long-lasting career to sort of make enough money for the rest of my life, racing was never going to fulfill that. So I needed to start a business, and it was literally like a few days after lockdown, or maybe even the same weekend, where the world started to lock down, when I saw the not the real F1 race or something held by Veloci
Yeah.
Esports. I thought, oh my God, this is the moment where now is the time to build something. And I was in Germany at the time. I left Germany, came back to England where I live in London, and just sat and created a website. First, Coach Dave Academy, in tandem with someone who works for me full time now, called James Parker. I built the website, and he designed some car setups for ACC. And then I used the money that we were making from that to found the SimGrid, which was always my ultimate goal. The setup thing, I never expected to be a sustainable business, which it has definitely become. I always wanted to create another GT playground, if you will, and it was the SimGrid. So that's where we are today with the World Cup and so on.
So the Coach Dave Academy was kind of a necessity, wasn't it? Because you suddenly on ACC, thanks to SRO, had this influx of professional racing drivers who had limited experience on sim racing. You had the experience on sim racing, and they were on such a high-profile platform at that point that they needed to be as fast as possible, and you were that key.
Yes. Yeah, it was completely unexpected. I'd done a little bit of sort of sim racing coaching over the years, over about a 12-month period prior, but quietly. It was just through my YouTube channel and a little bit of exposure that I got from my viewers. And I was coaching mostly in Gran Turismo Sport. But I did see that there was an opportunity with ACC. There was a player base or an audience which was being unattended to. You know, there's a lot of interest with iRacing and a lot of interest with Gran Turismo Sport, and ACC kind of sat in this awkward middle space, which deserved the attention, some attention, for creating a game which I think has the best physics engine, and a really great experience when you're playing it. And I was lucky that I had experience as a sort of developer in the technology space, web tech, experience from real racing and experience from sim racing, that I could kind of put it together in a way that it came across well. And then it was just surreal how the explosion that we managed to get in terms of brand exposure and so on. And I coached some just crazy people. I would get calls from Jean-Eric Verne, Charles Leclerc, Zach Brown from McLaren, providing setups to Jenson Button. It was just a bizarre period, I think, for everyone, though. We all got to experience a surreal moment during that period in sim racing, which we just never thought would happen. I think the craziest of all of it was I was a Ferrari factory driver for the virtual Le Mans series. I mean, that was just never in my wildest dreams. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would be wearing a Ferrari factory shirt in the Ferrari museum playing a racing game. I mean, it's unbelievable.
So in terms of your career highlights so far, I imagine having that esports link must be incredibly important for you, knowing that you've had so many years where you were simply racing games and you weren't racing in real life. So was that virtual Le Mans really special for you?
It was to me, I mean, I used to get laughed at all the time for saying that you could use a simulator to be a better racing driver. Like, really did, my whole life, but I backed it 100%. I had 100% belief in it. And that Ferrari opportunity, or that opportunity with Ferrari, it didn't just land on my lap. They put me through a pretty intense shootout against other real racing drivers in their academy, including Mick Schumacher, Fittipaldi, James Collado, like really big names. We had to do a shootout, multiple shootouts actually, before they chose me to represent them at this virtual race. And for me, it was a dream, not just to race for Ferrari, but to see that sim racing was getting legitimized, if you will. And from one of the biggest brands in the world, it was a combination of just crazy things, which sort of made it really awesome.
And what's kind of continued, and I guess has helped you still is that we spoke a couple of weeks ago to the boss of SRO Esports, and
Yeah.
the embracing that they've had. Okay, they've got their own platform and it's a lot easier for them to do that, but they've embraced it so much that they're offering points to the teams for the on-site events. Have you taken part in the first one? I'm not sure. I can't remember if you were in that one or not.
Unfortunately not. I had to compete in a European Le Mans race, which was a clash on the same date. Still not sure how they managed to work that one out. The first race of the year for both series, and they couldn't find a week where, things didn't clash. But anyway, I will be at the next one. Whether or not I'll actually compete myself is not clear because we provide the technology for the championship platform. So I don't know if there's a conflict there. I would like to compete, of course. I do believe I would be competitive, not super competitive at the moment, because the irony of running a sim racing business is how little time I have for sim racing itself. But I would still like to compete.
Now, the whole model, the whole build of ACC seems to have opened up an opportunity for SimGrid, because there are platforms that are very, very, very good physics-wise and useless at competing multiplayer. There are others that are very, very good at competing multiplayer and not necessarily as realistic with a platform. And ACC seems to fit in the middle ground of being a very, very realistic platform, but they didn't nail the ability to just jump in and jump into a race. And that's where SimGrid is filling that hole, right?
Yeah, that was honestly it. I came initially, I've played PC Sims and PlayStation Sims, but for me, the one I played the most because of my time schedule was Gran Turismo, because I could just, at any time of the day, there was a race that I could enter, and relatively easy to just pick up the wheel and go. And it was a surprise to me that ACC lacked that element. So that's what I wanted to fill with the SimGrid. I wanted to sort of, at the time, the dream's gotten a bit bigger, but at the time, my aim was to make it as easy as possible for anyone to race against another person on ACC, and also create the most high quality, professionally organized events that we had seen. Because up until that point, most of the events were sort of powered by donations and volunteers and stuff. And I really want to change that. I want to turn this into a business, not just for me, but for everyone. So now the dream of that is more the sense of, I want to create a platform which justifies the possibility for a sim racer to make a living off competition with the right amount of prize money and sponsorship and so on. So yeah, initially it was just, why can't I find a race at every hour of the day, which I can find on other platforms? So we went ahead and tried to build that, which we have now, because we have a daily racing platform on the SimGrid, which is like more targeted for amateur players, if you will, who want to get used to the game. And then if they get good at that, they can start entering our events or other events in other communities, ACC communities.
And how ergonomic and how easy is it to use the SimGrid platform as an amateur? Because ultimately, for me, as somebody jumped into ACC, I found it quite hard to find people to race against in the game itself. So do you just log onto your website, press and click, and it logs into the game itself? How does it work?
I wish. My dream is so that when you multiplayer goes to a SimGrid interface, but right now that's not possible. What happens is, we have a website, which is thesimgrid.com, and there's a daily link. And then we list races, 3 types of races that run every hour, and you can register for them. You have to have a Discord account, which is actually pretty common in the gaming world. To have Discord is a relatively low barrier to entry, but it means you don't have to register with your email address or anything. So it's 1 click to register. And then we use a bot to tell you when your race is starting and the server details. Then you have to log on to ACC, enter in the server details, and you can go. I wish that one day we can just say enter race, and it either fires up ACC or vice versa. You're in ACC and it just fires up a SimGrid race. That's a dream that I'm trying to get integrated into ACC. I don't know how long or whether we'll be able to achieve that, but let's just say I'm emailing them all the time about that.
Yeah, exactly. There is surely an end goal here where Kunos sees how well you are doing, and there is a marriage of 2 very good ideas as one. because ACC isn't open like Assetto Corsa was, and it doesn't allow you to just do anything and everything. Because I know that you can do that kind of thing with AC, but as a locked platform, ACC for the moment, I imagine you need some back scratching from Kunos.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, look, SimGrid is growing considerably well. We have close to 20,000 registered users, and on a daily basis, up to 10% of the daily active user base of ACC takes part in one of our races, in our daily race or professional event. So we are generating some influence, but we just have to be patient. The beautiful thing about Kunos is how open they are to their community and letting people develop on top of their platform. That's very unique. So I'm pretty sure that they're being very wary. They don't want to just focus, they say, on the SimGrid, but there's other communities like RCI and so on, which they just want to give as much freedom to the developers as possible. So, I understand their approach entirely from a fan and sort of player's point of view. From a personal point of view and a business point of view, I just hope that one day the SimGrid can represent racing as much as possible and be used by multiple platforms, ideally, because that's what I want. I sort of want to lower the barrier to entry for sim racing as much as possible. SimGrid is one step in that direction, but there's many other ideas on top of that, which I hope we can build upon so that sim racing becomes much more broadly recognized in the esports world. And we see many more esports players, and we see stadiums full of fans watching sim racers compete against each other.
How important is it to have your headline events, the VCO World Cup? Is that a promotional tool to get the best players from ACC in the world to talk about SimGrid and also then be promoting the platform as a whole?
It goes both ways. I definitely wouldn't do it if I didn't see that there was a commercial benefit for the SimGrid. But I'm also I want to find or create a platform which again justifies teams and drivers spending the hours and hours that they do competing in sim racing. I want us to find a star or a team which becomes bigger than the esport itself. You see that in League of Legends, you see that in Call of Duty and so on, and we haven't quite seen that yet in the sim racing world. So it goes both ways. I would like to find a star from the esports or sim racing world that gets bigger than sim racing itself. But at the same time, I'm fully aware, and I wouldn't do this if there wasn't a commercial benefit to the brand exposure that the SimGrid has gotten. People maybe don't know, but the SimGrid is only 8 months old, or 9 months old, sorry.
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Where does VCO fit into all this, and why is VCO a partner with you guys?
I first discovered VCO by watching some R Factor stuff, and also their Nürburgring stuff on iRacing, and they looked so professional. And I thought to myself, wow, that's what I want the SimGrid to be like. I want the SimGrid to have a brand presence like VCO. And then I got introduced to Florian, who runs and owns the VCO, by some of the guys in ACC. And we got into a call to discuss ideas and stuff. And honestly, we just hit it off.
That went on for a long time.
Yeah, we were finishing our sentences. And it was the call didn't end. The call would not end. And he messaged me a proposal about an idea that he wanted to run on ACC. And I said to Florian, look, that's exactly what we have already planned out, called the World Cup, SimGrid World Cup. Do you want to partner with us there? And he said yes. And as a result of that, we're now in a position where we sort of have created this awesome championship, which runs for the whole year, which has at this moment in time the biggest prize pool in ACC. And I'm super proud to have them on board. I'm super proud to have our name next to their name. So it's really cool.
I mean, you could have done it more simply, surely, running 12-hour and 24-hour races on a platform that hasn't got the longevity. I don't think I've seen anyone run a 24-hour race without little glitches here and there, and that you went full in, and seems to have worked.
Yeah, technology-wise, I was pretty nervous initially. I have a phenomenal team who runs the SimGrid operationally, headed by Michael Hamlet and Josh Martin. Josh is more on the commercial side, and Hamlet is operational and making sure everything is working. We use cloud-based servers, which I was initially very nervous of. I thought we needed one dedicated box just focused on the 24-hour race. But we stress tested everything last year. We did have a World Cup last year, but sort of relatively quietly in terms of promotion and stuff, just to see what we could withstand. And touch wood, we've had, relatively speaking, very few issues on our technology platform when it comes to hosting these longer races. It's still nerve-wracking. I got to be honest, when the race was starting on Saturday, I was at an ELMS race, a European Le Mans race, and having to focus on qualifying, and we had the SimGrid World Cup starting at the same time, and I was praying that these servers would stay up, and they did. They run beautifully well. And I think we were the first or second sort of ACC organization to run a 24-hour race last year. And when we saw that success, we were much more confident for this one. And it did. It went really smoothly.
Yeah, and there will be another one, I think, an SRO sanctioned one in the middle of the year, which is kind of I don't know if you can call it the official one, but either way, that will be happening again. What was really interesting for me is seeing sim racers having to adjust, because on other platforms and the endurance element is so well predicted, it's so well calculated. Sim drivers have so much time to practice. They get their setup nailed and they get lap times nailed. There's no safety cars. There's very little in terms of yellow flags. There are in a really professional kind of top split, there is hardly anything that is not predicted. Whereas in ACC, that weather.
Yeah. So when we first ran out Spa 24 last year, the test one, we wanted it to rain and we couldn't wait. Like the way that we calibrated the weather settings was meant to be utter hell for them. And it was bone dry. So for the whole race. And so it was kind of boring. And this time it went the other way. It was 21 hours of rain, I think, or 20 hours of rain throughout the race. And to be honest with you, I had some people complain, but I said, yeah, but that's 2 hours less than the real Spa 24 from last year that I competed in. We had 22 hours of rain last year. But honestly, if we could rather, I would like to have had a little bit more variables in these races. I wish there was a full course yellow or safety car element. We are debating how we sort of introduce that with an official's car, which is yellow, which becomes the safety car, and we communicate somehow to the teams that there will be a safety car at random times in the race, depending on some variables which justify it. Just something to open it up a bit more, because in real life, we do have these variables which play a massive role in the results. Whereas in sim racing, it's a different discipline entirely. It's very much down to perfection and banging in those laps, minimizing mistakes to the nth degree. But it also removes a little bit of, I would say, unpredictability for viewers, So I wish that there was a little bit more that we could play with in all of these simulators, where we could introduce a bit more of the real life unpredictability, which sim racers hate, by the way. They hate it if you say that it's going to be a dry race and it ends up being a wet race. They get really upset because they've tried to perfect, and that's the discipline of sim racing, they've tried to perfect those conditions and maximize every single lap. But I believe, in my opinion, and not everyone agrees with me, but in endurance racing, we do need that element of unpredictability, because what defines a racing driver in real life, a good one, is their ability to adapt to the conditions and to the outcome of a safety car and so on. So I want to see sim racers get used to that idea as well.
I am absolutely in your world with that one. I've spent hours debating with various sim racers for exactly that same thing. So very glad to hear that SimGrid will be going down that road. And I understand you're a partner also of the up and coming VCO. What do we call it in the end? The World Series? I can't remember what it's called. The GWPC or GW, something like that. Anyway, you're involved in that.
Yeah, we're going to hopefully provide the technology for ACC, the championship platform, if you will. We did discuss how we could do it for the whole series, but for all the simulator software that they're going to be using, iRacing and so on. But it just wasn't possible. Practically speaking, it's not possible yet. It is a dream of mine that we will expand to other platforms, but for now we'll just focus on the ACC side and hopefully put on an awesome event with our broadcasting team and so on. We're working on some cool things for broadcasting as well, which I unfortunately can't give away much of, but I hope that our tech for that will be ready for this new series by VCO.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. I love a bit of broadcast tech. That's definitely down my street. Crap at racing myself, but broadcast, I think I can do a little bit. David, I'm looking forward to meeting you in person in Puerto Rico in a couple of days. Is it this weekend coming? Yeah, I think it is, isn't it? Next weekend. Next weekend. Yes. See you in the real world. And thanks very much for joining us in the virtual.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.
As you know, everyone, 8 o'clock on Monday is VCO Esports Studio. Never know who the guest is going to be. It's always a bit of a surprise. It's always a bit of a knee-jerk to what's happened at the weekend. And there's plenty of finals going on even tonight on the VCO channel. So make sure you tune in for the GT Pro series. And I think the BMW Sim Racing Cup is also having its final round, the CS Cup, on our Factor 2. The other one on iRacing is already finished. We've got our champions from there. So plenty to keep you entertained until next Monday. Bye-bye.